All right, all right, all right. Yes, sir. You know what time it is, bitches. It's Dark Mage, and this is the Evil Dojo, coming at you with the sick flow. We've already talked about the code I already wrote a long time ago. The code you didn't know. Because you're slow. Creeping on that tiptoe. When I get stoned in my home, tetragrammaton. Got some interesting topics to talk about tonight. I am catching up on the news. There's a lot that's been going on, a lot I've not been directly addressing, because I like to sit back and gather information. I don't like to come to snap judgments. I think that's the fastest road to hell in general. Acting too quickly, not thinking, not taking enough information in. Rushing can lead to bad decisions. So, why are we rushing into this war? Why are we rushing into conflict? Are we rushing into conflict? Is it simply being made to appear as such? What is war? What is terrorism? According to KMFDM, terrorism is the poor man's war. War is the rich man's terrorism. What's going on in Canada? They're like gonna freeze truckers' payments for honking horns because they don't want to be forced to get vaccines. That's cool, I guess. I don't really know exactly what's going on. Maybe we can find out together. That's my hope tonight anyway. So please join me as we get settled in and we prepare for what might be the next world war. This is Dark Mage at Evil Dojo, living in the free world, broadcasting live. Come chat with us. You can chat via Bridge and the Twitch chat. You can chat via IRC and Pound Evil Dojo on irc.efnet.net. And you can also chat with us in Pound Evil Dojo on TCB Direct, ircd.chat. Welcome to the next revolution.
Sipping, popping some practice and biking. Laying it back, hoping that life in it. Again and again, it's every day, fuck a rehab, I just living my life away. Grateful, ever, drug possessors. My life expectancy up on the dresser.
Aesthetic, got me dead instead of time, energetic. Got me drunk, never regretted. I guess it's genetic, it ain't my aesthetic. That's fucking generic, suicide, the epidemic. Make the kids quit academics, take drugs till you epileptic. Call the paramedics, depression magnetic. I'm anti-kinetic, fucking apathetic. Again, I'm pathetic. Without me, then fucking forget it. Thought I moved on, but I keep forgetting.
Yeah. What up? What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Evil Dojo vlogcast, cockcast. I'm gonna stick my dick into your ear tonight. Yes, sir. What is happening? Man, I like this chat setup. It's pretty good. So, topic of tonight. Let's talk about terrorism, Canada truckers, war, and news. We need to catch up. I see a lot of people talking about video games in the chat. It's good. I'm going to keep this lighthearted. That's why I like KMFDM, because it's like such serious music. But I know that they have fun making it. Because I have fun listening to it. I grew up with Mortal Kombat as a soundtrack not long after I came out of my back surgery. That's how I originally got on the KMFDM. It was the first Mortal Kombat movie, which by today's standards is pretty awful, right? The new one, I don't think had the same impact as the old one did for that reason. Not to say that the new one wasn't good or that it didn't have good scenes or anything like that, but yes. Speaking of, I should advertise my channel in the bird nest, wherever it's at. There we go. Okay, so terrorism is the poor man's war. War is the rich man's terrorism. And this is what KMFDM coined in a recent song, came out within the last few years. Is that true? I mean, it seems like an accurate, concise take. I'd like to think as such. It's a lot, perspective based. And part of the problem with the dialectic and the discussion in society today is that everything is perspective based. And if you're attempting to push a particular perspective as being truth, as being the one way of seeing things, then you're dangerously close to being a totalitarian dictator of sorts, a fascist overlord. The kind of tyrant that stories of old depict, in the form of ancient conquerors who slaughtered thousands of enemies and held people under their thumb, with harsh laws and substandard living conditions. And my own family, of course, how American it would be to say if I said America sucks, right? Like, let's be real. I consider myself a citizen of the world first and of America second. I'm a human being first and foremost. America could get fucked. Like, there could have been any other universe I was born into where I wasn't born in America, born a white man, born with debilitating physical conditions that have ultimately impacted my quality of life. Just how the dice rolled, you win some, you lose some. That said, though, that could be the same thing that someone in a position of power says in response to, launching a bunch of Scud missiles at a village where a suspected terrorist is at and then killing their family, and then finding out that the person wasn't actually there or they weren't actually a terrorist. But then, in order to cover up the fuck up, they might contact the local media outlets who would be reporting on this attack or story and, try to control the narrative, right? Like, it's the kind of thing that people do. And it's an unfortunate situation that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? So we consider that perspective. We go into this whole research process as unbiased as possible, if that's even possible. We might uncover my own internal biases, right? Which I'm beginning to become re-aware of them. For a long time I might have masked them or just not paid attention to them, or continue to assert that my position is centrist, or that I am completely unbiased, when of course everyone has internal biases. Might I be jaded that I was not born physically capable of serving in the armed forces? Would I have reason to find everything wrong with the military industrial complex as a result of my position? Well, there's perfectly able-bodied people who choose not to serve the armed forces. We still have a draft, and you're technically required to sign up for it when you're 18 or whatever, as part of your voter registration. I don't know if it's optional or required now. In certain Asian countries, it's required for sure. Not that I would qualify for being able to serve anyway, but the idea is just there, and it's part of that toxic male programming that they instill in you as a kid, that killing is good, that a real man is a tough man who's able to tackle anything that comes at them and is able to provide for their families, and all sorts of things that are otherwise projected images of a stereotype that society itself is attempting to push. But in truth, there's a lot of different types of people in general, and not everyone's a warmonger. Not everyone wants to beat the drum of let's go get the bad guy, right? Like, why can't we just chill? Why is it always got to be like go 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 go? It's really hard to get things done for me, the way that I do things, versus the way that most of society operates. But I've been pretty successful in general, so I can't really say that I'm doing anything wrong or incorrectly. But when you allow outside forces to push at you, right, like to get inside your head, to influence your thoughts, your feelings, the way that you think, your mannerisms, ultimately affect who you are. And I feel like you're playing a losing game, or that you've lost already. That said, it's kind of like, Bruce Lee said, victory is all in the mind. The moment that you think that you've lost, you have lost. In other words, there's a direct pathway from point A to point B. And if you consider that there's a certain destination that you'd like to achieve, reach, this is actually kind of how I think about writing code. You can start from that point and work your way backwards. So you have to first define the outcome that you're attempting to achieve, and then figure out the steps that you need to take from point A to point B. And so I like to extrapolate backwards. So you start from the end state, and then you figure out the state before that. So if you have some program and you want to print out hello world, you start from hello world and figure out what's the next thing that you need in order to make that text print out. There's certainly more complicated examples, but it's really not I don't feel like it's a difficult concept to follow. And if I can follow it, then the upper brass certainly can. I was once told that the United States spends trillions of dollars a year on first strike capability. So we have really no reason to ever worry about the threat of virtually anything, because we're so deep inside of everyone's shit that we wouldn't, have a problem knowing exactly what everyone plans to do before they do it, so that we have the ability to basically either allow it to happen or to do something to stop it. And that sounds about right. You really think about it. So we have to consider, what is it that the media is trying to do by controlling the narrative. What stake do they have in planting thoughts in people's heads, trying to get everyone onto a wavelength that they are defining, as opposed to allowing oneself to find their own wavelength? You know? What's up with all the programming that they're doing? I just don't get it. Maybe we can kind of dig deeper. So, attempting to be unbiased, there's a few things I'd like to know about. I need to do more research into. The Canada truckers, for one. You know, there's some really big stuff going on in that department. I first got onto this motherfucker named Tucker. I don't even watch his shit that often. Every so often he pops up in my autoplay, right? But I first caught this guy eons ago when he was interviewing the head of the Atheist Agenda at my university. Atheist Agenda was very famous, made national attention when they had their Smut for Smut program. Smut for Smut was a program that allowed you to change, or rather exchange, your Bible for pornography. And that was pretty mind-blowing at the time. I thought it was really fucking cool. I still do. Even looking back on it, it was like fucking genius. Got a lot of attention. Tons of people would come up to the table and start debating. It was a fantastic site. Something that I was briefly a part of. And the head dude got interviewed by Tucker, and that's the first time I ever encountered Tucker Carlson, who has since, developed a famous career on YouTube. Back when I caught this guy, he was like wearing a bow tie. Anyone who remembers old school Tucker Carlson knows about the fucking bow tie that he used to wear. Are y'all even paying attention? Just checking to see if the chat is okay. So, let's catch what he has to say. Here we go.
When thousands of blue-collar workers showed up in Ottawa several weeks ago to protest the tyranny being imposed against them, the Prime Minister of Canada refused to meet with them or to speak to them. Instead, he fled the city. And then from his bunker, he called the truckers Nazis. When they still didn't leave the city, Justin Trudeau suspended democracy and declared Canada a dictatorship.
So I just picked up on the word Nazi. They're just saying the truckers are Nazis. What? Let's back that up a second.
Being imposed against them. When thousands of blue-collar workers showed up in Ottawa several weeks ago to protest the tyranny being imposed against them, the Prime Minister of Canada refused to meet with them or to speak to them. Instead, he fled the city. And then from his bunker, he called the truckers Nazis. When they still didn't leave the city, Justin Trudeau suspended democracy and declared Canada a dictatorship.
The federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act to supplement provincial and territorial capacity to address the blockades and occupations. The Emergencies Act will be used to strengthen and support law enforcement agencies at all levels across the country.
It sounds a lot like the Patriot Act when 9/11 happened, right? Like every police department, got access to millions of dollars worth of federal grants to be used in the pursuit of stopping terrorism. Sounds exactly like that.
This is about keeping Canadians safe, protecting people's jobs, and restoring confidence in our institutions.
So let's be clear. This is a defining moment in the history of Canada, in the history of the English-speaking West. The Emergencies Act is martial law. It has never been invoked in the history of that country. Now, by law, the Emergencies Act is allowed only in emergencies, in, quote, urgent and critical situations that seriously endanger the lives, health, or safety of Canadians. What's happening now does not qualify. What's happening in Canada now is not an emergency. Here's what it looked like this weekend.
And that's quite the party. I would definitely hang out there.
According to Justin Trudeau, everyone you saw in that tape is a terrorist.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Kids in their bouncy castles. Justin Trudeau has unilaterally revoked their civil liberties and authorized men with automatic weapons to haul them to jail. Trudeau was allowed for the arrest of this man, for example, making food for the terrorists.
You can receive a free meal, irregardless of what faith you're from, what caste, creed, religion, doesn't matter. It's about the community kitchen. We all eat as one and humanity's equal. So the Seva concept, helping the community, is what we're practicing here today. We're here alongside the truckers in the fight for freedom, and we're doing our part from the Sikh faith.
So again, all of these people can now be arrested on sight simply because of where they're standing. But being arrested is the least of their problems. An arrest suggests bail. You can get out of jail. You can't get out of the country Justin Trudeau has just made. Under martial law, Trudeau now has the power to force banks to seize their bank accounts and insurance companies to cancel their insurance. That means they can't actually live in Canada anymore. They are non-persons. They're enemies of the state, and they will be crushed. At least one trucker knows exactly what's coming. He has seen it before. He came to Canada from Nicolae Ceausescu's Romania.
Why did only people meant to vote? Why 100 people, 180 or 200 people to decide your life or my or another? Let the Canadian people do it. No.
It's all corrupt too, all those people voting.
It's sad, man, when some people, they decide your life, like 300 people, they decide your life when you are 30 million.
Yeah.
Let us vote.
Good
So
point.
is it an overstatement to compare what is happening in Canada right now to what happens in a Stalinist dictatorship? Well, the slogans are different. In the Eastern Bloc, they used to talk about solidarity. In Canada, they talk about diversity. But the repression is similar. Today, Canada's Deputy Prime Minister, by the way, is a former American journalist, maybe not surprisingly, announced that going forward, Justin Trudeau will regulate all crowdfunding and cryptocurrency under the Terrorist Financing Act. Really? So Justin Trudeau is now in charge of all of your finances. He's in charge of cryptocurrency? How does that work? And on what justification? And if that wasn't clear enough, Trudeau's minority government unilaterally just sent another $500 million to the authoritarian state of Ukraine, where the head of the rival political party is now under arrest and where opposition media has been banned. That's the country they're now in solidarity with. You can see where this is going. In fact, it's already there.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube.
All right. Well, so we got a right-wing perspective of the trucking thing, right? I actually have a search pulled up over here because I want to get a broad perspective. I want to get info on the trucker situation from different news sources. We just got Fox News, and we already know their stint. You know, these truckers are doing it for freedom. They are in opposition to the vaccine mandates. But it seems like the government is definitely attempting to starve them of resources. Let's take a look at... Nice, the Ottawa police chief resigned. That's fucking awesome. Let's check this out. Bloomberg.
And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in Canada invoking his emergency powers. Protesters at 2 border crossings now planning to leave. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Brian Platt, who has been covering the developments across Canada.
I'm gonna grab
from
some
the
sweet
nation's
potato
capital,
fries.
Ottawa, where the city's police chief resigning today after his approach to the protests drew much criticism. So, Brian, let's start there. What can you tell us?
I mean, the police chief has failed from the beginning to, well, first to stop the convoy from digging in the city, in the capital city, and then from being able to keep it contained or crack down on it. He's largely taken a strategy of trying to wait the protesters out and negotiate with them rather than taking any kind of aggressive move of making arrests or clearing out the streets. And people lost patience with it. And so now I think he has resigned today, and I think we're going to start to see a more aggressive police response. I don't know exactly what that means yet, but I think things are going to change.
Well, things certainly are going to change if the truckers pull out. Are they on their way? Are those big rigs rolling off the bridges and opening up supply chains?
Well, so it depends on what you're talking about. The bridge that everybody was most concerned about, the Ambassador Bridge between Detroit and Windsor, was reopened on Sunday and has stayed clear. So police seem to have done a good job there. The one in Alberta, between Alberta and Montana, I believe that's flowing or may flow again today. But there's still other border crossings that are blocked or under threat, and there's no sign of the capital city truckers leaving the capital city anytime soon.
And Brian, you and I were talking earlier today as part of that emergency powers move by the Prime Minister. You talked about some of the moves to
Protesters at 2 border crossings planning to leave. Emergency powers could freeze protesters' bank accounts, and the Ottawa police chief resigns. Nice.
to essentially get in the way of funding sources. So there is this banking connection to this story. Can you just explain that to our audience?
So, I mean, it's kind of interesting in that the police, at least in the capital city of Ottawa, are concerned that they can't get the truckers out by force, by going in and arresting or towing. And so the strategy that the federal government is now leading is to go after the money, to freeze the accounts of anybody involved in either directly involved but being here with the truck or supporting somehow. So you could have your personal bank account frozen. If you're a company whose truck is being used in a blockade, your corporate account could be frozen, and your vehicle insurance will be suspended. So they're really trying to put the financial screws to the truckers to get them to leave on their own, not just the truckers, but anybody participating in the blockade. So the hope is that by doing that, you don't have to have the riot cops come in and in a situation that could get really messy.
Another reminder as to why cash is king. Brian, what is the COVID situation like? Because this is what it all comes down to, right? They are angry about, at least initially, they were angry about having to get vaccines. But is it even necessary anymore? What's the COVID situation like in Ottawa and throughout Canada?
The numbers are dropping everywhere. Most provinces have now laid out a plan for removing not all restrictions, but a lot of the restrictions. Ontario just today, the biggest province where Ottawa is, just today said a lot of restrictions will be gone in March. So I think all of that was going to happen anyway. It's possible these protests have sped up the process, of course. But, you know, the federal government I think, if anything, is going to be very reticent to roll things back quickly because they don't want to be seen as capitulating to the protesters. They are slowly moving things back. They made remove some of the border testing requirements today, but I mean, things were on track to start being rolled back this spring regardless. So the protests may have sped that up a little bit.
Let's see. Stratum linked me to something that's interesting here from Jacobin magazine. I don't know anything about Jacobin. Let's kind of gauge who they are. Jacobin is an American socialist magazine based in New York. It offers perspectives on politics, economics, and culture. As of 2021, the magazine reported a paid print circulation of 75,000 and over 3 million monthly visitors. So they're kind of not very popular. And they probably have some pretty left-wing takes. I mean, to suggest that it's a front for a right-wing anti-worker agenda. So they're saying that the Freedom Convoy doesn't really care about the rights of the average worker. Convoy organizers previously harassed workers on the picket line and ignored calls for support from racialized truckers fighting against wage theft. The solidarity of immigrant truckers. Interesting. Yeah, it always goes both ways, right? Like, one thing I noticed from the right when I was a kid was that they always claim to be pro-America and pro-freedom, yet they're so willing and ready to impose a set of restrictions on those freedoms, thus not really making it freedom. I mean, the very word conservative and traditionalism imply, you know, a set of values that are relatively static and unchanging over time. And so you're not really given an opportunity to, like, explore outside the box. And that's one thing that always turned me off about the right as a kid, was that it was very restrictive. It did not allow me to think freely. It did not offer me the same sort of opportunities, affordances, and really, honestly, I can really say that most of my skills come from that way of thinking in general. So I can't really say it's a bad thing, or that thinking left or socialist isn't bad or anything. But that's why it's important for me in general, I think everyone in general, to aim for the center, to try not to let biases lead you too far in any one direction. Once said earlier, one thing that's similar between the far left and the far right is that they both seek to impose restrictions on freedom of speech, thereby limiting all freedoms, and thus should be the one thing that they agree on. And so it's important to know that whenever these sorts of issues come up, you're going to get a far left stint, a far right stint, and every other stint in between, up and down, left and round, round and round. She goes. Where she stops, nobody knows. Jacobin is left-wing. Yes, that's why I figured Zartet, just based off the brief sift over of Wikipedia. Well, but even then, I probably didn't even have to do that, right? Just reading the title here. So you got one group saying that they're all about freedom. You got another group saying that they're not. We're already fucked. You got two conflicting viewpoints, right? How do we get to the center of all this? You know, what is the trucking thing taking our eyes away from? Yeah. One thing that I like to do is that whenever I actually get around to checking the news and paying attention and then doing, you know, actual critical evaluation on it like this, besides get multiple perspectives, is get really stoned and forget what I was talking about on stream. That's exactly what I like to do. Whenever you see things in the news, you get distracted. Like, they take your attention away from other things that could be going on. It's pretty hard to ignore this thing over in the Ukraine when it's basically all that NPR is talking about. And it's also one of fucking Russell Brand's only talking points. I actually like this guy, but he's ascended to React Lord status as well. I was about to say, when I went over to get my sweet potato fries, I pulled a Hasanabi. I was late saying it though.
What is it good for? Business, the media, the government? Let's have one then. You know I read the comments, right? Loads of you in the comments are saying, Russell, do a video on what's happening between Russia and the Ukraine. Now, we know that there are complex relationships between Russia and America, historic Cold War and post-Cold War relationships. There are complicated relationships at play between Russia and the Ukraine, obviously. And I reckon one of the reasons we feel like it's difficult to understand what's actually happening is because we know that the mainstream media benefits in terms of ratings and therefore in terms of advertising revenue from there being a war. And we know that the military-industrial complex benefits from there being a war in terms of sales of munitions, arms and various other facilities. So how, in such a complex machine of duplicity and obfuscation, are we meant to understand the actual facts? Well, let's do our best in this video to break some of that stuff down. As 100 religious, social justice and veterans groups demand that President Biden stop escalating tensions over Ukraine, the White House continued to warn of a potential imminent invasion. People keep saying this war is going to happen. How can you schedule wars? There's going to be a war Wednesday. See you there for a war. The tension shouldn't be escalated either.
That's a good point. B-Rex was saying in chat earlier something to the effect of, the war is going to be on Wednesday. Like, we're going to wake up tomorrow and war, right? Is that really how this works? But if they know ahead of time, how could they report on it? The propagation of events is a lot more complicated than the news lets on. In fact, at certain points, I think NPR has so little to talk about that they take what are otherwise really simple topics and then they overcomplicate them. Like, the question of whether or not to wear a mask, for instance. It's fucking binary logic, yes or no, just do it. Don't be a fucking retard. Yet they managed to have, like, a 20-minute discussion on whether or not, like, masking is something that you should do. And it's like, the people who say they can't breathe wearing masks are not having problems breathing, they're having panic attacks because they're claustrophobic. Shut the fuck up.
Should they by Joe Biden? Whatever you think of Joe Biden, and I read the comments, so I know what you think of Joe Biden. He certainly was elected on a kind of platform of...
I have to say, if my asthmatic ass can breathe through a mask, I don't buy for a second anybody's complaint that they can't breathe right, whatever, with it on.
No more of these unnecessary wars. And you feel like, don't you, if you support someone like Biden, like, don't escalate this war then, particularly not if it is for the kind of interest that I've already lied. Economic interest, media interest. If that's what's behind it, then stop it. During Friday's White House press briefing, Jake Sullivan, Biden's national security advisor, said that Russian military action could begin any day now.
They've been saying that shit for a fucking week. I'm sick of it. It's like, fucking invade us already, goddamn. Let's get this shit on. Like put up or shut up. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. Nothing more grotesque than a media pushing for war, says Edward Snowden.
Even as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky discourages panic and downplays the idea that a Russian invasion is imminent, American officials are portraying armed conflict between Russia and Ukraine as inevitable and US military support of Ukraine as necessary. He's the actual president. No, I don't think there's anything to worry about. It's okay, no need for war. No, there's gonna be a war, Vladimir. Essentially, that's a pincer movement, isn't it? It's inevitable. Our support is necessary. That means there's no decision to be made. They're talking about it as if it's meteorological, as if it's just a weather system that's happening. happening that you can't do anything about, and obviously we have no choice but to support them. And I suppose a side effect of that is that we will make loads and loads of money. Now, I'm not saying there aren't complex issues at stake. I'm in no position to make such a verdict. I don't know enough about it. But I know that as a discerning viewer of media, and I know that's what you are too, that it raises questions. Journalist Joe Gill wrote that in the 21st century, the media war is a critical element of any pre-war planning, and this appears to be reaching its crescendo.
The 21st century, the media war is a critical element of any pre-war planning.
Oh, so that's the bit we're in now. We're in the bit now where they prime us for a war. That's the bit where you sort of like, if you just ask someone on the street, is there going to be a war? Well, it seems inevitable. War's necessary. Where'd you get that? Television. The narratives repeated in the Western media are so thunderingly pro-Ukrainian and anti-Putin that it's hard to extract from the simplistic framing the complex nature of the conflict. By talking up the inevitability of a war...
I kind of said that earlier, right?
Ukraine against Russia, Western intelligence agencies and their media outliers are implanting the idea that war has already started. He continued, noting that Bloomberg even accidentally announced that Russia had invaded Ukraine.
What? Really? Oh, fuck. That's awesome. Big time fuck up, Bloomberg. Holy shit.
Bad news, everyone! Russia has invaded the Ukraine. Oh, sorry, that's not till tomorrow. We're still making a few missiles. Noting that the US and NATO are pouring in high-tech weaponry and training up Ukraine's armed forces, making it a much more military capable foe. They've always been doing this thing, America, and they popping over to places. Okay, guys, do you need some training? Why? What's going to happen? There's going to be a war. Why? Because we said so. Get ready for the war! From where the Russians are sitting, the deployment of billions of dollars worth of new US and UK military hardware on its borders is a sign of escalation rather than defence. So, of course, we are presented with information along the lines of, hey, it's necessary in terms of defence to get all this military hardware over there defensively. But from a Russian perspective, if we were watching a Russian news outlet, what they would say is, no, what that is escalation. You're bringing weaponry into a neighbouring territory with whom we have historic conflict. And you can certainly see that perspective. I know there are other people with much more experience with, military history than me that go, no, you're being naive. America has these, but all of those ideas, if you ask me, are being currently amplified by institutions and organisations that benefit from a war. Wouldn't you feel more comfortable that you had a great understanding of the current escalation if you were able to read a disclaimer like, no one will financially benefit from this war? And like,
yeah, like have some backing, like.
The news media was saying, we're going to report on this in a sensible way rather than like day to day like this.
What do you think of the idea of a war now? I'll take that as a yes.
That's it, Chris. It's war. This is a war.
That's it. Yes, it's war.
We're being primed for it. It escalates separate from the narrative. You might want to read those Baudrillard's essays, The Iraq War Didn't Happen, There Is No Iraq War. And what he's essentially saying is that war becomes such a media spectacle that it's actually deracinated from the reality of the situation. And I know that sounds like a complex philosophical notion, but just consider this. I'm not in the Ukraine. I'm not in Russia. Some of you will be and have been, but you don't bloody well know what's going on over there. All you know is what you're told. And what you're told is the result of certain interests.
Kind of like how the victors write the history books, right?
It's showing that mainstream media and corporate interests operate on their own strata, and their function is to make you be compliant and passive so that you don't go, what's actually happening here? We're kept in a state of peculiar delirium by the inundation of non-data to the point we don't even know what's real. So your confusion about Russia and Ukraine is part of the process, because if you actually understood it, you would go, well, why is that happening? Whose business is that? Who's doing it? Who benefits? That's what critical thinking would be in this instance.
Right, that's why we're here. This is what Evil Dojo is all about. We're here to ask the big questions. What's going on over in the Euro?
Critical thinking ain't facilitated by a media and corporate environment that continually sends out hypnotic messaging that disconnects you from the actual reality. The particular kind of crisis story that American officials are deploying in the situation with Ukraine is a familiar one. An underdog faces a threat from an authoritarian regime, so the United States must come to the rescue with a military response.
So, one thing that I think about too, maybe this is a little bit weird, but for all the talking that going to war with Russia and the Ukraine or whatever that's going on right now, I noticed that the Ukrainian and the Russian chatterbait girls seem completely disconnected, as if, you know, war is not about to break out in their countries. So it must not be a big deal over there, right? If the chicks aren't like bothered by it, maybe they just do their thing without really caring, or, you know, feeling like it's like whatever happens happens, and it's like I can't control it, you can't control it, and whatever is going to happen is just going to happen. And a lot of people who feel like that they can control it are going to attempt to enforce a viewpoint, or like shout, really loudly on social media and different platforms about their opinion. And people who might be in positions of power might attempt to enforce policies that lean in one direction or the other. That's just the nature of power, right? Power seeks the nearest vacuum. It follows a real field, and there is a mathematical dynamic to that whole system.
They're always doing that one. It's like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But this time, Ant-Man. But this time, everybody's Russian. In a crisis, the American public is often discouraged from asking questions. And when they do, militarism is usually the answer. What's the alternative? Asked retired Brigadier General and former defence attaché to Moscow, Peter Zwack, in an interview on NPR. He's hardly an unbiased source. Whether it's my time doing wars or benefiting financially from wars, I've learned one thing. Wars. The choice being put forward is between military action or inaction. To opt for inaction is presented as an abandonment of Ukraine.
But sometimes it is better to do nothing, is it not?
We can't abandon Ukraine. Why do you care about the Ukraine all the time? No, I love I've always liked the Ukraine. I liked the Ukraine before it was fashionable. It's not Radiohead. No, I've always liked them. See my Ukraine poster over there? Zwack's prescription is lethal weapons, specifically Javelin anti-tank missiles and Stinger anti-aircraft missiles. Admittedly, they sound cool, but it is terrifying. And the US is delivering.
Terrifying. Weapons, war, terrorism.
Just over a week, the US made 4 shipments of weapons to the Ukraine, a move that has US arms manufacturers anticipating soaring profits for their shareholders. Some of the largest weapons companies in the world, Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, have been openly telling their investors that tensions between the countries are good for business, and General Dynamics, meanwhile, is boasting about the past returns the company has seen as a result of such disputes.
Don't want to make some money? Find out which manufacturers of weapons, like figure out which guns the Ukrainians and the Russians are holding, and then find out also what the Americans who are being deployed in the region are holding, and then invest in that weapons company. Do it. You will profit. Trust me.
Here we go again. Jeremy Scarhill, co-founder of The Intercept,
That is
wrote,
not financial advice, but do it.
retired Pentagon officials on the payroll of the defense industry are presented as experts. Yeah,
Bitch, I'm not watching Hassan. This is motherfucking Russell Brand, bitch.
yeah, that's what the tag should be. Retired Pentagon official on the payroll of the defense industry. They should tag them like that. Often with no disclosure of their financial conflicts of interest. Misinformation, anyone? Is that
What up,
misinformation?
Big Jira? How you doing, man?
And once the shooting starts, mainstream pundits will drop any remaining pretense of journalistic integrity and begin openly cheerleading for the troops. There's a format, isn't there? There's a format to how this functions. First of all, obfuscation and confusion. Then, necessity and inevitability. Then, the requirement for our support. What, are you unpatriotic? Don't you support the troops? Yeah, I do support the troops. Guess what form my support of the troops takes? Don't send them off to fight a war so that some people can make a profit. Then when they come home, don't provide them with the necessary healthcare that they require and neglect them and abandon them. That's my support for the troops.
Nice.
My support for the troops doesn't sound as much like support for the weapons industry, so maybe that's misinformation.
Like, you can be pro-American troops without being pro-war, right? I have a lot of family who served, and a lot of family who is still tied to the military. My own dad speaks very fondly of his time in service, and it was able to bring me here, so I can't really say it's an entirely bad thing. Where would I be if not for that? Like, what if mom got with someone who wasn't in the military, right? Like, what if I didn't have military genetics?
You only need to look at how the Democratic Party and its affiliates spent the year so far responding to anti-war and de-escalatory arguments. These initially didn't come from left-wing or even liberal lawmakers and pundits, but from the right side of the political spectrum. Have we gone through some looking glass? Have we gone through... Am I in Wonderland right now? Because when I was a kid, I was told this. The right wing, they want wars. The left wing, they're for the people. They're basically for the people. There's some complexity, there's a middle ground, but that's basically...
That's how it was, or at least how it appeared to be when I was a kid growing up. It's one reason I kind of had a distaste for conservative ideas. Everyone who is now and was then a boomer back when I was growing up, all fell into that category. I didn't know virtually any liberal adults when I was a kid.
Doesn't mean anything anymore, does it? It doesn't mean anything. Maybe the most prominent of all has been Fox News' Tucker Carlson, who as far back as December 21 was admonishing Republicans for goading Biden into being more aggressive. Since then, he's continued to question Ukraine's strategic value to the United States and argue against war with Russia. Carlson's broadcast reportedly led some Republicans to adopt his same position on the Ukraine crisis, a notable shift for the party that has typically never met a war it didn't want to charge into. So, the terms right-wing and left-wing and the affiliated and associated ideologies appear to be mutable, don't they? And
yes, this goes back to what I was saying earlier. Third time on the stream now. When you move too far left and move too far right, you're going to find that they agree on something, and not in a bad, not in the good way either. This is where we get into the oppression of freedom of speech, and the only way that you can oppress freedom of speech is with violence.
It's telling that even as Carlson continued to broadcast vile agitprop calling for the banishment of the homeless and fear-mongering about immigrants, stuff that I blatantly disagree with, it was his entirely sensible position on the Ukraine that got the most aggressive, widespread pushback from the liberal democratic side of the spectrum. Criticise the homeless all you like. They're smelly and they're expensive. But you do not criticise our profitable wars. We're liberals. On CNN, host Brianna Keilar accused Carlson of having a pro-Russia stance. Tucker's propaganda is very convenient for Russia.
Yeah, you've seen a lot of pro-Russia stuff on the right ever since 2016 and the Trump thing. There's all this connection between Trump and Russia that may or may not be really legit, but what we do know is legit are the connections between Hillary Clinton's email servers, the DNC hack, his name was Seth Rich, WikiLeaks, and if you throw back to the corruption in the military, going all the way back to Bradley Manning, and the, what was the name of that whole thing where the helicopter gunned down the journalist. I forget the name of that shit off the top. There was a very famous video. Yeah. I'm gonna bust this back out.
You see that dude Tucker Carlson? He ain't hello, Mr. Putin, how's it going, sir?
Throwing back.
For more than 2.5 years, the wire service Reuters has been trying to find out what happened to their 2 staff members on this street in the suburb of New Baghdad. WikiLeaks says this is what happened.
Yep, he's got a weapon too. Hotel 26, Crazy Horse 18, have 5 to 6 individuals with AK-47s. We got RPG. All right, we got
The voice on the tape, presumably a member of the military, says there has been shooting in the area and receives permission to open fire.
When people are labeled as insurgents, are they really insurgents? It seems to be the case that from the scenes in this video, that any person that is not a man and sometimes not a woman is by default labeled as an insurgent.
Light them all up. Come on, fire! Hey, Roger. Keep shoot. God damn it, Kyle.
Sorry, I should warn everyone, this is a mature stream, and there will be curse words, there will be violent footage.
I hit him.
This is a place of hard chats. Hard chats only.
Yeah, look at those dead bastards. Nice. 2-6, crazy.
From a distance, you hear the voices on the tape watch as the wounded try to crawl to help. But when help arrives...
Come on, let us shoot. You're engaged. 1-8, engaged. Clear. Come on. Clear. Oh yeah, look at that, right through the windshield.
In this video, I think you see the corruption of pilots and the military by war itself, in particular by the modern nature of aerial warfare. So you see these young pilots acting like they're playing video games, only the high scores they are getting are with real human lives.
We call frequency. Yeah, I just drove over a body. Yeah.
Viper 5-2, report free change zone 4.
Even from high above, the harsh reality becomes evident as the troops that arrive find 2 children wounded. You see them carry their small bodies and call for help.
Hey, I need to get the brass to drop ramps. I got a wounded girl. We need to take the rest of mile.
The response on the tape...
Oh, it's their fault for bringing their kids to a battle. That's right.
Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Their fault for bringing kids into a battle. Man. Ain't that some shit? You know, from one perspective, the people doing the killing see the other as terrorists, and thus you have to take them out. From the other person's perspective, the terrorist, or the so-called terrorist, these dudes aren't even armed, I don't think. They misidentified things that they thought were weapons, but weren't actually weapons, if I recall correctly. And I think it's good to be able to throw back to certain points in time during potentially historic moments like this. My dad, being a history teacher, taught me well in this department. I couldn't memorize dates for shit, but I greatly understand the interconnected relationship and the complex dynamic of intergovernment, international relations, and how social dynamics unfold over time to allow for the shifting of state and country borders, the redistribution of resources, and the general movement of populations can ultimately lead to the changing of entire countries. But oftentimes these changes can come without force, just by natural movement. And I say natural as if like war isn't natural, because it is our kind of nature as beasts to hunt and to acquire and to protect, right? And the military kind of capitalizes upon this instinct in people and human beings by allowing you to profit off of your natural desire to participate in something greater than yourself, when most people who end up in that position have nothing greater in the first place. Why else would they join the military?
He don't care about Russia, does he? He don't care. Ronald Reagan's son said, I don't want to throw words around like traitor or traitorism, but that's coming pretty close. It's on MSNBC where this kind of rhetoric is on overdrive, with talking heads accusing Carlson of shilling for Vladimir Putin. No one's got any morals, have they? No one's got any connection to any ancient principles of care and love when they're saying this stuff on MSNBC. And I bet they'll dare say, it's our obligation to help the people of Ukraine. They're in a lot of trouble over there. Won't they? They'll be coming up with all that kind of crap. It's like, come on, mate. Do us a favour. You're shilling for weapons manufacturers and because your own certainty that ratings will improve if there is a war.
I mean, it's also part of the America Police, aesthetic, right? Like,
Well, police, get down on the ground!
Terrorize this.
nice.
All right, let's make this interesting. Kia!
That
You lose.
Waka
Getting
waka.
away with the WMD. I got him. Damn, I missed him. Sarah, he's got the bomb. You gotta fix.
I got him, Carson. He's heading for the loop.
Damn right, Zard said I love this movie too.
Your plans are over.
All right, Sarah. Yeah. All right, team.
Step into it.
All right. Bonjour, everyone. Don't worry, everything is boom. We stopped the terrorists.
Everything is bomb. Yeah, it's important to keep it lighthearted during this serious discussion, right? I mean, shit, this came out in 2004. I was 18. That was half my life ago. Holy fuck. Think about it. A lot's happened since then. Graduated high school, college, got my degree. 3 years after falling into a depression where I wandered kind of jobless, got kicked out of a friend's house, moved back into grandma and mom's in Florida, threatened to kill myself, got my first job as an iOS developer and a web developer, worked for a local web development company, worked out of my bedroom for like 3 years, and then I got my first corporate gig after I moved back to Florida after shit kind of fell apart, and then that was 2013. And during my first year as a corporate iOS developer, I discovered EFNet. And I've been here ever since. But lots happened since 2014 as well. Let's see what else. I lost that iOS developer gig in Corpo, and then about a year later got another job as a Corpo security consultant. Then I lost that job too, and I began delivering food to try and make ends meet. That kind of fell apart. Stayed with some friends for a while, but they had 3 cats, and I couldn't breathe at all with them. So I, decided to go with my gut and check in on mom and grandma again, and ended up staying in Florida for another like 3 or 4 years. During which time, a lot of crazy shit happened. I actually went to jail like twice. And I got a medical marijuana card also. I began smoking hella legal weed. And I began tutoring sometime before that. I actually tutored when I was in college too, and I actually mentored, which is why I was able to get this position so easily. And now I'm several hundred students into tutoring and kind of burning out on tutoring, to be honest, which is why I'm doing a lot of this kind of thing where I'm developing an application in my spare time, as well as helping out at least one other person, while also trying to take care of my grandma. And whenever, you know, I basically squeeze all of this into my current existence somehow. But that's been life since 2004. A lot's happened since then. But America is still playing world police. It seems like some things never change.
Stop the pretense of doing the work of the autocratic Russian government, feeding people Russian propaganda and rooting for Russia. There's almost no alternative to these views on the network. That's astonishing, isn't it? Everyone has become detached from reality. That's what I feel like, that we are living in a spectacle, in a constructed reality, in a corporate machine. And our consciousness is like the fodder of this machine that just has to be moulded for the desired outcomes. Right, it's war now. Right, it's a pandemic. Right, it's this. And I'm not saying there's not a necessity for a war or that there isn't a pandemic. What I'm saying is there is a requirement for balanced, transparent, open conversation. And if you say that there isn't, that's not because you're anti-misinformation. It's because you are prizing particular information and likely profiting from it in tangible ways. It should hopefully be clear why this is so dangerous. If what Carlson's saying amounts to siding with Russia, parroting Kremlin propaganda and disloyalty and traitorism, then this applies to anyone else arguing against a war over Ukraine. I remember when it used to be that sort of patriotism and nationalism was purely the territory of a particular set of affiliations. The idea that this authoritarianism that we're experiencing now extends right into the tropes of the old right makes me feel like that nothing is real, nothing has any value. Here is the poisonous fruit of the Russiagate nonsense, which even some leftists humoured, believing it to be a harmless way to undermine Donald Trump in the short term. Instead, what's happened is that a liberal establishment that endlessly compares Trump to the demagogic Joseph McCarthy has now wholesale adopted McCarthy's style of reckless accusations and disloyalty charges, sprinkled with the Bush-era tendency to equate opposing war as being on the side of the enemy.
Oh yeah, no, like, isn't it the obligation of any true patriot to directly oppose your own government in order to make it better? I think that would, I mean, whenever we say, you know, jokingly in LRH, you know, death to America, I feel like that's kind of the implication, is that America actually cannot be destroyed, and that, you know, anyone who wants some can come bring it right here, as Tech 9 once said.
Isn't it extraordinary that these particularly unpleasant interludes in American history have coalesced under an apparently liberal, progressive, democratic government? It makes me think these labels don't mean anything, that all anyone cares about is the ideological pursuit of their own gains, their own profit, their own financial interests. The result has been a marked hawkish turn on national security among the left-of-centre public. Tenuously construe anything as serving Russia's interests, and that idea becomes automatically illegitimate in the eyes of a large chunk of the US public.
Yeah, heaven forbid that we like anything that Russia does, right? Yeah.
What we end up with is a powerful disincentive. After all, who wants the trouble of being blacklisted from cable news, or worse, face a news cycle accusing them of doing Putin's work? So there may well be a war between Russia and the Ukraine in the next day or two, who knows? But what we can now tell for certain is that there are interests at play that would benefit from there being that war. And perhaps the reason we find it hard to understand the true reasons for there being that conflict is because the reporting on the war is confusing and beset with all kinds of conditioning and prejudices around patriotism and saying this is good and saying that is bad and you're pro-Russia and you're a traitor. It's once again obfuscated inundated in endless rhetoric that is designed to benefit the interests of the powerful, be that the military-industrial complex or the mainstream media. Who knows? There may be legitimate reasons for a war between Russia and the Ukraine, and there may be reasons to support one of those sides in that war. What I will tell you with a degree of certainty is that unless money is removed from that situation, and unless you de-school yourself from the bugging you've received from the mainstream media, you'll never know whether it's right or wrong. Now I'd like to see you do that, Brian Stelter.
He's got a point. I mean, there's obviously interest beyond simply wanting to, quote, protect Ukraine. Why would you want to protect the Ukraine? The argument is always to protect democracy. Whenever there's a democratic state in trouble, America, the great defender of democracy, has to come and intervene. We must free the shit out of everyone, whether or not they want it. It's interesting when you think about it like that, right? Lots of talk on the Ukraine. Let's see. Fuck Joe Rogan. Fuck Trump. Let's see. Fuck Tucker Carlson. I'm just like a bird. You know, if you think about Terry Davis, shout outs to Terry Davis. Maybe we'll watch some Terry Davis videos at the end of this. What's reality? I don't know. When my bird is looking at my computer monitor, I thought, that bird has no idea what he's looking at. And yet, what does the bird do? Does he panic? No. He can't really panic. He just does the best he can. Is he able to live in a world where he's so ignorant? Well, he doesn't really have a choice. The bird is okay, even though he doesn't understand the world. You're that bird looking at the monitor, and you're thinking to yourself, I can figure this out. Maybe you have some bird ideas. Maybe that's the best you can do. Shoutouts to Terry Davis, the one true prophet and savior of computer science. Terrorism, in its broadest sense, is the use of intentional violence to achieve political aims. The term is used in this regard primarily to refer to violence during peacetime or in the context of war against non-combatants. The terms terrorist and terrorism originated during the French Revolution of the late 18th century, but became widely used internationally and gained worldwide attention in the 1970s during the Northern Ireland conflict, the Basque conflict, and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Increased use of suicide attacks from the 1980s onward was typified by the 2011 September 11th attacks in the United States. There are various definitions of terrorism with no universal agreement about it. Terrorism is a charged term. Interesting. Loaded language. It is often used with the connotation of something that is morally wrong. Governments and non-state groups use the term to abuse or denounce obscene groups. Varied political organizations have been accused of using terrorism to achieve their objectives. These include right-wing and left-wing political organizations, nationalist groups, religious groups, revolutionaries, and ruling governments. Legislation declaring terrorism a crime, has been adopted in many states. When terrorism is perpetuated by nation states, it is not considered terrorism by a state conducting it, making legality a largely gray area issue. Terrorism is the poor man's war. War is the rich man's terrorism. There is no consensus as to whether terrorism should be regarded as a war crime. The Global Terrorism Database, maintained by the University of Maryland, College Park, has recorded more than 61,000 incidents of non-state terrorism, resulting in at least 140,000 deaths between 2000 and 2014. Nice. I'm reminded of something. Isn't the GAA on a terrorist watch group? The Gay N-Word Association was an internet trolling group. They targeted several prominent websites and internet personalities, including Slashdot, Wikipedia, CNN, Barack Obama, and Alex Jones, and prominent members of the blogosphere. They also released software products and leased screenshots and information about upcoming operating systems. In addition, they maintained a software repository and a wiki-based site dedicated to internet commentary. They were called a cyber terrorist organization by the Terrorism Research and Analysis Consortium. Congratulations, GNA. You did it. Members of the GNA also founded Goatse Security, a gray hat information security group. Members of Goatse Security released information in June 2010 about email addresses on AT&T's website from people who had subscribed to mobile data service using the iPad. After the vulnerability was disclosed, the then president of the GNA, Weave, and a GNA member, Jackson Brown, were arrested. Shoutouts to Weave. Hope he's doing okay. This whole talk is about freedom of speech, and I was, and still am, a fan of his work, even if he does not consider me a friend anymore. But I always, thought the whole For the Lulz thing was very poetic and just. Poetic justice. If it can be done, it should be done. For the lulz, right? As my rap said, there is a guy in solitary confinement named Weave. His high crime was blogging. Shit you can't believe. Originally accused of hacking AT&T, despite only manipulating URLs in actuality. So, you did it for the lulz, and that's terrorism. Huh, interesting. And see, this is just two viewpoints juxtaposed together. So you can kind of laugh at the subjective hilarity of an objective situation. If you take facts as they are, without putting the stint on them, or applying the stints to all the facts, or applying opposing stints, we can kind of create situations where new viewpoints emerge. It's always important to take the third perspective when given two viewpoints. Nothing is binary. Yes and no are a lie. I support the working class. Well, shucks, good to hear, friend. And dude's like, nah. That's funny. There's a bunch of this big ass page. I'm not going to read the whole thing. But it gets the point across that it's all viewpoint, it's all perspective, and nothing is so black and white as to be able to just simply put a yes or no. In the end, decision making might be binary. In the end, you might have to make a yes or no decision on something. You either allow something to happen, or you choose to stop it or try and stop it from happening. And when you make the decision to stop something from happening, your force is then put up against the force of the events unfolding themselves, and truth prevails. David beat Goliath out of skill. He didn't have to be bigger than Goliath. He just had to fucking clock him in the head with that stone. That's all it took. In a similar manner, numbers may not be so much of a big deal when considering strategic alignment and foresight, being able to map out possibilities ahead of time and be able to control a situation, which is part of what they're trying to do by putting this whole war thing on TV in the first place, right? Like, they want to get everyone used to the idea that we're about to go to war. We're about to go to war. We're always about to go to war. What's going to change when that, like what would change that? What's the tipping point? At what point is the trigger for the whole event, for the beginning of the new state transition? There has to be some sort of flag that's tripped, some sort of binary flip, some bit flip in the ether, in the Akashic record, in order for that to change. Something novel has to happen in order for reality to descend back into chaos, into the darkness of violence itself, which is the primordial state, the state from which all things have arisen. It's all choice. Let's take a look at what ABC has to say on this whole trucker thing. Fallout from the hundreds of truckers protesting Canada's vaccine mandates.
It was nice. It was a little bit of a break in the nightmare we were going through.
Michigan truck driver Joe Filbert is back at work today.
On a regular day with all this bullcrap going on, it's a beautiful sight. And it really, as a driver, it broke my spirits to see that the bridge was down.
Making the 1.5-mile trip on the Ambassador Bridge in his big rig over the Detroit River and into Canada.
I'm displeased at how Justin Castro Trudeau handled the situation.
It's Filbert's first trip since the bridge shut down. Demonstrations erupted when a group of Canadian truckers, calling themselves the Freedom Convoy, and their supporters united in defiance against strict vaccine mandates in their country.
No more mandates, no more passports, no more lockdowns. Let us live our lives.
Bringing traffic to a standstill at the biggest commercial crossing between the United States and Canada, with $300 million worth of goods crossing each day, and about a third are connected to the auto industry.
We need to stop this. I can't take this anymore.
This protest is illegal. This demonstration is illegal. It's okay to protest. It's not okay to commandeer the roadway to the busiest border crossing in North America.
But on this morning, the traffic is once again moving.
Hold on.
Crossing in North America.
Say no. Say no to the satanic New World Order. Nice.
Though traffic is once again moving, the city of Windsor looks different. Police here not taking any chances.
It kind of bummed me out also when I came across the bridge and I seen that the police presence, it's now a police state.
Now entering its third week, demonstrations across Canada have interrupted commerce, blocked key border crossings, and clogged cities.
Yeah, we're fighting for freedom, my man! We're gonna keep fighting!
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau today invoking emergency powers for the first time since the law was created.
The Emergencies Act will be used to strengthen and support law enforcement agencies at all levels across the country.
It began in January in the Canadian capital of Ottawa, when the government implemented COVID-19 vaccine requirements for truckers crossing the U.S.-Canada border.
Began in January. Here we are, 2 weeks later, at least.
While the Canadian Trucking Alliance estimates 85 to 90% of the 120,000 Canadian truckers who drive cross-border routes are in fact vaccinated. The new mandate igniting a firestorm. Over the weekend, the group growing to an estimated 40,000 people demonstrating in front of Parliament, including some counter-protesters who want their city back. The protests spreading across the country, from Nova Scotia to the Peace Bridge connecting Canada to Buffalo. At one blockade in Coots, along the Montana border, an alarming discovery. Canadian police today arresting 13 individuals found with weapons, including a machete and high-capacity magazines.
These weapons were brought by people who had the intent on causing harm.
The Canadian protest inspiring action not just across the border, but oceans as well. Large protests against the COVID-19 restrictions erupting in the Netherlands.
Oh, nice police brutality.
Over the weekend, tear gas clouding Paris as protesters clashed with police and more than 50 were arrested. Back in Windsor, Joe Filbert drives one of the 7,000 trucks that make the cross into Ontario daily. Many, like him, hauling important supplies for Detroit area auto manufacturers.
Everyone's heard the brotherhood between Windsor and Detroit to even make a car. Sometimes those parts may go back and forth across the border.
So actually what I'm feeling out of this right now, you know, you take a look at the war thing, right? The guns industry, the weapons industry is like screaming, help, we're dying, we need some help, you need to start a war so that we can make money. And over here in Canada, you've got this connection to the American auto industry, based, you know, around like the government trying to force all these truckers to get vaccinated, and they're like, no. And then you've got the American auto industry hurting from sales and being like, help, we need to move your truck so we can get our parts. And
several times. It might go from a frame to having suspension put on to being shipped back to have an engine put in, or vice versa, or whatever.
There's multiple trips.
Multiple trips.
Despite the bridge now being open, damage is already done. Experts say last week alone, workers in Michigan may have lost up to $51 million in wages.
It's one thing to have some disruption in your neighborhood or in your capital city. You do it for 18 days and it affects your economy, it affects your ability to send your kids to school. Then you heard from the Prime Minister and his team today that this is having very severe economic impacts on not only Canada, but the United States.
Following unrest in the capital, the movement reached Windsor last week, with protesters parking big rigs at the mouth of the bridge.
you know, I'm actually thinking that the truckers were inspired by the supply chain crisis, where some retards piloting boats fucked up, causing a massive blockage in a particular canal. That was a canal where tons and tons of cargo ships were supposed to be delivering stuff, and they weren't able to for weeks because they had to unfuck this boat. And that might have been an accident, but I'm feeling like a lot of the people who began organizing this thing got the idea from that. They probably were like, well, we have the ability to control this particular shipping pipeline by, you know, if everything's going through this particular channel, in other words, this highway, this roadway, then we could simply find a way to block it off. And all we have to do is pay off enough of the people who are in control of that route and distribute enough funds so that it can be a sustained effort over time. And for a minimal investment, some group might have been able to just completely fuck North America in a lot of ways. I don't know if it's because of this, but like, I swear to God, the price of gas has risen 20 cents in the last 2 weeks. Like, I feel like it's been a week or two maybe, and like I saw gas here in Texas go from like $2.80 to $3. $3 in Texas is expensive. We get some of the cheapest gas in the entire country. Over California, they're paying like fucking 4x. Like, they're paying like $9 a gallon or some shit. I remember even here, there was a point where gas got up to like $4 in the past. And a lot of my gas timeline price point centered around when I began driving in high school, college, when gas was about $2 a gallon. So over time, I've actually watched it rise up to like $4.50 and then actually drop all the way back down to $2. And now we're sitting at somewhere in between $2 and $3, like $2.90, $3.10.
Eventually shutting down all traffic.
If we don't stand up right now for this, there won't be another time to do
So
it.
you got all these people who are like cosplaying as like conservatives. I don't know how that works in Canada, or like, you know, I guess there's a lot of like RPing or LARPing going on, where they're emulating a lot of what they've seen happen on the TV in the United States. It's probably given a lot of people, a chance to get outside and have some fun and, really take back control over their lives and not feel so oppressed. At the same time, imagine you're not in those demonstrations. Imagine you're just like trying to chill in your crib and you can't because this fucking block party is going on. Who's going to help you? The police? The police haven't done shit. They can't do shit. They're having to use indirect methods in order to starve this effort of resources. And just think, the people here are too stupid to use Bitcoin, are too stupid to use Algorand. Hell, Litecoin and Algorand have cheaper transaction fees than any other cryptocurrency I can think of off the top. In fact, El Salvador is using Algorand underneath their moniker of it being Bitcoin. It's actually an Algorand powered network. Algorand's fucking great. You can send money instantaneously for virtually no cost. Like when I say the gas fees on Ethereum are too high, it might cost you $30 to transfer $100, and you might as well go to fucking Walmart and do a MoneyGram at that point. Whereas with Algorand, you can transfer thousands of dollars in Algorand for a fraction of a penny. No shit. And if you want to maybe get some free money and send it to this Canadian trucker effort, maybe at least 1 out of 1,000 people participating in this thing is technically competent enough to use Bitcoin and to use Coinbase. And so I direct you to get $10 free when you join Coinbase using my link and you buy at least $100 in crypto. I also get a little bit of a kickback too. So if you want to not only consider educating some of these truckers on why cryptocurrency is a superior method of money transaction as opposed to traditional financial institutions. This is not financial advice, but I am giving you free money via Coinbase. So do it for freedom. And that said, I am, certainly pro decisions. Like, I don't believe people should take decisions away from other people, generally speaking, except in the situations where those decisions might infringe upon someone else's freedom. I do believe in the truest sense of Aleister Crowley's version of "do what thou wilt shalt be the whole of the law." And by this I mean 2 stars that are moving in space, free to move about as they please, so long as they do not directly come into contact with each other, are completely free from influence in terms of effect. One is not infringing upon the other's movement, and so it should be, I feel. I believe that we should all be free to dance together in this beautiful society where everyone is able to have completely different opinions and judge them on whether or not those opinions are valid. That is the nature of free speech. That is the nature of free decision making. And by free speech, no, dude, Glenn, they actually printed more than that. Like 90% of all the US dollars that have ever been printed in history have been printed in the last 2 years. That is a fact, and I'll have to get sources on it, and all of it came from stimulus money. They printed more money during that period, and that's why the threat of inflation is very real. They were talking about inflation for a long time before they decided to print however many fucking $1 trillion out of nowhere. Terrence McKenna was correct when he said that money is toilet paper. And so, when you consider how outdated these financial institutions are and their means of transactions, and that the government is able to just step in and shut off your funding by one mean or another. Maybe they contact the credit card companies and no longer allow you to make transactions on your debit card, or maybe they contact your, they're able to like reverse trace your transactions because they're open on an open ClearNet, and then they're able to like figure out your bank account number and then contact your financial institution and then put a freeze on your account so that you can't make withdrawals or deposits or whatever. Then you don't have access to your money. What do you do then? Should have had some Coinbase, should have had some crypto, should have had a hard wallet. Anyone can have a wallet on their phone. You write down your keys, store them in a safe, and you can go around and just, here's your money, just plop it up on their cell phone. And apparently these truckers haven't gotten to that point yet.
The crowd ballooning this weekend as the blockade finally came to a head. After warnings on Friday from law enforcement, enforcing a court-ordered injunction to end the siege.
Even though a judge passed an order that Ambassador Bridge should be clear for traffic by around 7 o'clock tonight, as you can see, the protesters aren't going anywhere.
By Saturday morning, the two sides had their first clash as law enforcement arrived in force and began clearing the bridge. Hours later, the big rigs began departing.
We're watching law enforcement push away from the entry point of the Ambassador Bridge. The protesters' area is getting smaller and smaller.
But by nightfall, protesters on foot and in pickups still remain defiant.
Freedom, that's all we ask for. Freedom.
We've heard your frustration with COVID, with the measures that are there to keep people safe. We've heard you. It's time to go home now.
Whoa. No, you didn't hear them then, though. If you're being like that, that's fucking lame. Like, lame response. Like, you could do better. Just kind of brush aside their concerns. We've heard you. We've done nothing about it. Fuck off and die.
If you do not leave the area, you will be arrested.
By Sunday morning, law enforcement cleared the last of the protesters in Windsor, making almost 30 arrests.
Day 7 of the protests, and it looks like law enforcement is finally making its last push. You can see no protesters behind me. They're not even letting media back here. They're telling me to move back.
Off the sidewalk, please.
Though the Ambassador Bridge is now open, questions remain about the motives behind this nationwide movement.
Most people are there for peaceful causes. There is a small percentage of those that are there that I do have concerns. You would put them in an extremist category in the way that they think that violence might be part of the solution to address their grievance.
Some experts say the protests are a product of foreign influence, citing various crowdfunding efforts.
I think we'll see more freezing of funds, more shutting down of those crowdfunded sites. That's a good thing, in part because there are some early indications that perhaps some of the money that has been flowing to these groups might not be coming from just good citizens.
Today, Ontario Premier Doug Ford announced he's loosening the province's pandemic restrictions.
That dude does look like Rob Ford's brother, and I think he actually is.
But stressing his decision is unrelated to the protests.
We're moving in this direction because it's safe to do so. Today's announcement is not because of what's happening in Ottawa or Windsor, but despite it.
While the protesters in Windsor might have lost the battle with law enforcement this weekend, it's clear the sentiment isn't going away.
The whole world's watching. They're going to move us out of here today. We'll be back.
We're standing for Canada, and we're not going to quit. We're not going to give up, ever.
We're not going away. We'll be back.
Michigan trucker Joe Filbert was able to get back on the road today, but he thinks his Canadian counterparts are far from done.
It takes a lot for a human being to deal with single-digit temperatures for hours on end in defiance. And so that tells me right there, if you have enough resolve to sit there and stand in that type of inclement weather, you'll be back.
And they must be really frustrated.
Oh, extremely so. And anybody who's been following the protest would be stupid to think that it's done.
Amen. I don't think it's done for a second. Where there's a will, there's a way. When the MPAA came down hard on Napster in order to shut down music piracy or to stifle it, like 5 different clones popped up. There was fucking WinMX, there was Kazaa, there was LimeWire, there was SoulSeek, and of course BitTorrent. Peer-to-peer distributions were absolutely unstifled. In fact, Netflix, I believe, adopt that model, and a lot of the streaming services use a distributed database storage system that allows you to quickly retrieve content in a very similar manner. So you smack one mole down, another one pops up. You know, it's a never-ending game of whack-a-mole from the government's perspective. They're never going to be able to completely topple this, because the only thing that they could do is turn into a completely totalitarian state, which would only increase and create resentment against the government, which just wouldn't be in their best interest in the first place. But then again, look at a lot of other countries where that kind of thing happens, and what does happen? Shit goes on fire, stuff burns, people die, buildings get destroyed, life becomes intolerable, and you seek to flee your country. But these people love Canada, apparently, or supposedly. You'd have to question the kind of money and where it's coming from in order to even begin to speculate on the sources of these funding. But the timing is very interesting, that this is all happening juxtaposed with the Ukrainian war situation. That's just where my viewpoint is currently at, is that, you know, I'm seeing these two things happening at the same time, and one is supposed to distract from the other. But what happens when you pay attention to both? Can we find a connection between Russia, the Ukraine, and the Canadian trucker situation? I'm going to leave that to a viewer exercise. What are your thoughts? What are your comments on this whole situation? Do you agree with the truckers? Do you think it's actually a secret funded effort by Russia to destabilize the Canadian people? What do you think about the Ukraine situation? Should America intervene? Is it our obligation to protect democracy? Or are we being misled? Are we being lied to? Is the situation over there not what it is presented as over here? You know, there's a thing with NATO and Ukrainian joining, and Russia wants to keep them as part of their fold and all this sort of stuff. I want to thank everyone for joining up tonight. Very chill stream, just, you know, a couple hours here, almost a couple hours, taking a look at current events, talking about war, terrorism, media perspective, media bias, trying to get to the heart of it all and keep a critical eye while we do so. I want to shout out to everyone who's been supporting me over the years. You're a big help. Couldn't do this without y'all. Deacon, Era, Eraser, Logic, Jira, Dingo Pride, Milkness, Perplexa, and all my Twitch subscribers. Thanks for joining tonight. I hope to see y'all again soon.